In the pursuit of power, if you still believe in loyalty, in friendship, in brotherhood, you've already lost. Power does not reward the naive. It punishes them. The world is not kind to those who play fair in a rigged game. It is not built for trust. It is built for leverage. So ask yourself, are you playing the game? Or are you being played? Because in this arena, the only thing more dangerous than your enemies are your allies. Let's begin with a truth that most people are too afraid to say out loud, but feel deeply. Power isolates. The higher you rise, the fewer hands reach out in sincerity. Every smile hides a motive. Every gesture conceals an angle. The illusion of camaraderie is the most elegant lie the world has ever told. Philosophers and rulers, generals and moguls, they've all faced the same cruel paradox. The more powerful you become, the more alone you are. Today we're going to dismantle the illusion, not because it's comfortable, but because it's necessary. Section 1. The Mask of Friendship. Let's be honest, most friendships are circumstantial. They're built on proximity, convenience, mutual benefit, not unconditional loyalty. Power changes the equation. When you gain influence, people don't see you anymore. They see a gate, a resource, a stepping stone. Their affection becomes performance, their loyalty conditional, and their smiles calculated strategies. You see, the dangerous part isn't that people turn against you. It's that they pretend not to until it's too late. Every secret you share becomes currency. Every favor you offer becomes a debt someone else intends to collect. And yet we cling to the idea of loyalty. We convince ourselves that a true friend would never betray us. But history tells a different story. Julius Caesar was stabbed by his closest allies. Napoleon was betrayed by his own generals. And even Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, was surrounded by men who wore masks more than faces. Power does not corrupt others. It simply reveals what was always hiding. In power, the game is not personal, it's strategic. And this is where many fall, confusing personal relationships with political survival. But survival doesn't care about feelings. It respects only control. You don't need to be ruthless to win, but you do need to be clear-eyed. You must understand that people move based on incentives, not affection. You must recognize that even those who swear allegiance to you are bound by opportunity, not honor. And you must realize that alliances are not built on love, but on fear, respect, or necessity. Break the balance of any of these, and the alliance collapses. In ancient Chinese philosophy, Sun Tzu wrote, "He who is prudent and lies in wait for an enemy who is not, will be victorious." But what if the enemy is your friend? Then victory comes not from trust, but from anticipation. There's a myth that if two people have mutual goals, they will stay loyal to each other. But goals change. Interests shift, and when the prize is close, people begin to calculate. We are not wired for permanent loyalty. We are wired for survival. It's not that people are inherently evil. It's that most people are pragmatic. They may like you, they may admire you, but when survival whispers in their ear, admiration turns into competition. In corporate boardrooms, in politics, even in friendships, power is always the silent third party in the room, watching, influencing, testing. And the higher you climb, the more tempting it becomes for others to push you off. Visibility is not strength, it's exposure. When you're in a position of power, everything you do is seen, everything you say is recorded, everything you think is analyzed. And in a world addicted to outrage and destruction, your image becomes the easiest target. One misstep, one poorly chosen word, one vulnerable moment, and the wolves will circle. Not because they hate you, but because tearing you down makes space for them to rise. The people closest to you become your biggest risks, not because they're evil, but because they're human. And humans are unpredictable under pressure. In this way, power is a curse wrapped in a crown. So what's the answer? Isolation? Not exactly. The answer is self-sufficiency. You don't need to be alone, but you must learn to stand alone. You must become immune to praise, indifferent to betrayal, and anchored in principle, not emotion. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And what lies most outside our control? Other people. To be free, you must detach from the illusion that others owe you loyalty. No one does. And that's okay. What matters is that you are loyal to your purpose, that you are aligned with your mission, that you are not enslaved by the need to be liked, loved, or validated." This is not cynicism. This is clarity. If you want power and want to survive with it, you must master yourself before others. You must become the strategist and the soldier, the architect and the weapon. This means you do not reveal more than necessary. You do not rely on promises, and you do not mistake kindness for commitment. You learn to listen more than you speak. You observe more than you react. You calculate, but never show your equation. And above all, you never forget that everyone around you has the potential to betray you, because you have that potential too. We are all capable of turning when the stakes are high enough. The only difference between the betrayed and the betrayer is who blinked first. Here's the truth. Power is not evil. It's not corrupt. It's neutral. But it exposes everything: your fears, your blind spots, your false beliefs. It forces you to choose between comfort and clarity, between illusion and truth. You can cling to the belief that others will protect you, or you can protect yourself by knowing the game for what it really is. At the end of the day, there is only one person who must never betray you. You, not your enemies, not your friends. You. If you can hold that line, if you can walk through fire and remain unmoved, then the silence of solitude becomes a shield, not a sentence. The game of power is not about domination. It's about discipline. And in a world full of actors, the one who refuses to perform becomes the most dangerous of all. Power is a mirror. And when you look into it, it doesn't show you who you want to be. It shows you who you are. In the game of power, the wise don't seek allies. They become their own army. And perhaps, just perhaps, true strength isn't about control, but about refusing to be controlled. Every person in power will face a Judas. Sometimes it's a friend, sometimes a colleague, sometimes it's someone who once worshipped them. But betrayal never begins with hatred. It begins with closeness, familiarity, dependence. People do not betray strangers. They betray those they believe have something they want, or something they didn't get. This is the irony of leadership. Your success becomes a mirror that reflects other people's failures back at them, not because you harmed them, but because you reminded them of what they couldn't achieve. And in that reflection, resentment is born. The same hand that once applauded your rise will be the first to pull the trigger, not because you changed, but because they did. Knowledge deepens isolation. Once you see the game, you can't unsee it. Once you understand human nature, not in theory, but in practice, it becomes impossible to return to innocence. This is the philosopher's curse, to know the truth, and still be surrounded by those who don't. Nietzsche called this the loneliness of the higher man, the man who has gone beyond herd morality, who no longer plays by the tribal rules of emotional comfort and unearned trust. That man is not celebrated. He is feared, misunderstood, often demonized, because when you refuse to participate in the collective fantasy of blind loyalty and performative kindness, you become a threat, not because you intend harm, but because your clarity exposes the illusion others need to survive. And so, the higher you ascend in understanding, the fewer companions you have. That is not failure. That is the price of awakening. Powerful people often learn to keep others at arm's length, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. They create buffers, systems, layers of protection, not just physically but emotionally. They know that intimacy is a liability in a world where leverage is currency, so they develop the art of selective access, controlled vulnerability, strategic silence. They share less, trust slowly, reveal nothing that can be used against them later. This isn't cruelty, it's survival, and ironically, It's those who fail to do this, who often end up broken, bitter, or betrayed. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, but spent his nights writing to himself in solitude, not because he didn't have advisors, but because he knew the most important dialogue is the one no one hears. Distance, in this sense, isn't a wall, it's a lens. It gives you perspective. It protects your center. In a world full of noise, distance is how the powerful preserve clarity. You will often hear that empathy is essential in leadership, that to rule justly, one must feel for others, step into their shoes, carry their burdens. And while this sounds noble, there's a trap hidden in it. Empathy, when unguarded, can be used against you. Your compassion can be weaponized. Your kindness can be interpreted as weakness. Your emotional availability can become a backdoor for manipulation. This doesn't mean you must be cold, but it means your emotions must be disciplined. A king who weeps openly cannot hold a sword. A general who hesitates for love loses the war. Empathy without discernment leads to exploitation. Real leaders feel deeply, but they act deliberately. They don't collapse under the weight of others' emotions. They carry their own with strength and choose wisely when and if to carry someone else's. There comes a point in power, philosophy, or wisdom where words lose their edge. You realize most arguments are pointless, most justifications are hollow, most conversations are theater. And in that realization, silence becomes your first language. You no longer feel the need to correct every lie spoken about you, to defend your name in every room you're not in, to explain your intent to people who already decided to misunderstand you. Silence is not passivity, it's power. When you don't react, you control the tempo. When you don't explain, you force others to reveal themselves. When you say nothing, you remain unpredictable. This is the art of the shadowed mind, the one that moves without noise, thinks without needing applause, and strikes only when necessary. In the end, it's not the loudest that survive, it's the most unreadable. Here's the final revelation, one that almost no one in power speaks aloud. To hold power, and not be owned by it, you must be willing to walk away from it. Detachment is not the absence of ambition, it's the mastery of it. It means you can lead without being consumed by status, influence without becoming addicted to validation, command respect without needing to be feared. Only those who can walk away are truly free. The world cannot manipulate a man who has nothing to prove, nothing to chase, nothing he fears losing. That is true power, and the paradox. It is in this detachment that you often gain the greatest respect, because people sense that your strength does not come from desperation, but from alignment, from stillness, from sovereignty. The man who needs no one commands everyone. So now you understand, power is not a throne you sit on. It's a mirror you stare into, one that reflects your deepest fears, your hidden motives, your capacity for betrayal, and your hunger for validation. It will tempt you, corrupt you, shape you. But if you remain awake, if you stay grounded in truth, not fantasy, you can navigate this brutal terrain without becoming a casualty of your own ambition. Remember, you do not need to be feared. You need to be untouchable. You do not need to be loved. You need to be respected, even by your enemies. You do not need a crowd. You need clarity. And in the silence of your rise, when the cheers fade and the masks fall, you will find that the strongest are not those with armies or wealth or applause, but those who never betrayed themselves. If this resonated with you, it's because something in you already knows it. It knows that strength is not noise, that power is not popularity, that loneliness is not weakness. It's time to stop fearing isolation. It's time to stop seeking security in the familiar. Greatness, wisdom, and clarity don't live in the crowd, they live on the margins, where few walk alone, and that path, it's open to you, but you must choose the comfort of company or the clarity of solitude, because power doesn't ask, it reveals, and once you've seen the truth, there's no turning back. Humility is often praised, but in powerful circles, it's also misunderstood, and more dangerously, mimicked. There is a humility that is real, grounded, quiet, wise. It does not boast because it has nothing to prove.
It listens more than it speaks. It stands firm not to dominate, but because it knows what it is. But then there is the humility that is weaponized, a performance, a strategic lowering of the head, while the eyes still scan for control. This is the humility of politics, of manipulation, of those who know that looking small is sometimes the best way to become large. In philosophy, true humility begins with self-knowledge, not self-deprecation. It's not saying I am nothing to appear virtuous. It's understanding you are not everything. You are not immune to weakness, not exempt from ego, not beyond corruption. The greatest leaders aren't those who deny their power, but those who carry it with a silent respect for how easily it could turn them into something they'd once despised. One of the hardest illusions to destroy is the myth of fairness. We're taught from childhood that the world rewards goodness, effort, and honesty, but philosophy and experience will eventually teach you the truth. Fairness is not a law, it's a story. The world is not fair, it is strategic. It's governed by power, perception, timing and structure. The best person doesn't always win. The most honest voice doesn't always get heard. The most moral decision doesn't always get rewarded. And this harsh truth creates bitterness, until you realize that playing by a myth does not make you noble. It makes you naive. If you want to navigate the world of power, you must see it for what it is, not for what you wish it were. But here's the key. Accepting that life isn't fair doesn't mean becoming cruel. It means becoming clear. You stop whining. You stop waiting. You start thinking, strategically, calmly, with your eyes open. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start asking, what does this teach me? And how do I move with it? Because clarity is power, and the fairy tale must die before the strategist can live. Every leader has two courts. One is external, advisors, partners, supporters, allies. This court is visible, political, filled with noise and performance. But the other court, the inner court, is what determines your fate. Your inner court is composed of your deepest principles, your mental frameworks, your emotional patterns, your conscience. If your inner court is disloyal, if your thoughts are disorganized, your emotions impulsive, your principles shallow, you will be overthrown from the inside. No external betrayal can match the damage caused by an internal collapse. That's why the Stoics meditated daily, why mystics withdrew into silence, why warriors practiced discipline not just in battle, but in thought. Because if you cannot trust yourself, you will build alliances out of fear, make decisions from insecurity, seek validation instead of wisdom. The inner court is always whispering, but only those who spend time in silence can hear it clearly. There is a type of presence that does not need to speak to be felt. Walk into a room, and everything shifts. No threats, no bravado, no noise, just gravity. This is the power of embodied presence, the kind that only comes from years of alignment, from knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you will never compromise. You cannot fake it. You cannot buy it. You cannot script it. It comes from having lost and rebuilt, from having seen darkness and chosen not to become it, from having faced temptation and walked away not because you had to, but because you chose to. Presence is the residue of choices. It's what's left when you've burned away performance and stood in your own fire. People may not understand it, but they feel it, and often they respect it before they realize why. Because in a world of noise, distraction, and insecurity, clarity is magnetic, stillness is powerful, and presence is proof that you do not need to fight loudly to win. So what is the end game? If power isolates, if betrayal is inevitable, if detachment is necessary, why pursue strength at all? Because the alternative is far worse: to live asleep, to die having never known what you were capable of, to hand your life over to the whims of others, to be shaped by culture instead of principle. That is not peace, that is sedation. Power, when pursued with integrity, is not about control over others, it's about command over yourself. It's about being the kind of person who cannot be bribed, broken, or bent. It's about becoming a force, silent but unshakable. And that path, though lonely, is sacred, because the real end game is not applause, not domination, not legacy. It's clarity, To reach the end of your life and know I saw things as they were. I chose what mattered. I did not betray myself. That is a victory no empire can match. Silence is often mistaken for weakness, but those who understand power know silence is a strategy. In a world addicted to noise, the one who does not react becomes unreadable. And in power, being unreadable is invaluable. When you don't speak, people reveal themselves. They fill the void with their assumptions, their fears, their strategies. They show you who they are, while trying to guess who you might be. This is why the wisest people often say the least, not because they have nothing to offer, but because they know the cost of premature expression. Once your thoughts are spoken, they can be challenged. Once your hand is shown, it can be countered. But silence creates space. Space for others to reveal themselves. Space to observe, calculate, adapt. Lasozzi wrote, "Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know." He didn't mean mute your wisdom. He meant preserve your power, because silence is not absence. It is presence without performance. The clearer your vision becomes, the lonelier the path tends to be. Not because people abandon you, but because clarity separates. You begin to see the distractions others chase, the games they play, the patterns they repeat. And slowly you stop participating. You stop arguing to be right. You stop pleasing to be liked. You stop explaining to be understood. You simply walk your path, and let others misunderstand you if they must. This is the loneliness of lucidity, and yet it's also liberation, because the fewer illusions you carry, the lighter your soul becomes. The more you rely on inner truth, the less you fear outer noise. Lucidity doesn't make life easier, but it makes it real. And in a world drowning in performance, reality is a radical act. Power brings visibility, but visibility also brings shadows. The more you rise, the more projections you carry. You become a symbol, a target, a myth. People will see in you what they need to see. An enemy, a savior, a fraud, a leader. Their judgments have little to do with you. They're merely reflections of their own inner conflicts. This is the burden of power. You lose the right to be seen as human. You're no longer allowed mistakes, no longer permitted weakness. Every action becomes amplified. Every silence becomes suspicious. And yet you must keep moving. Because if you stop to defend your image, you lose your essence. The true philosopher king does not lead for approval. They lead from principle. They understand the shadows will come, but they do not fear them, because their throne is not external, it is internal. Deep thinkers rarely live easy lives. To see the world in layers is to be constantly aware of contradiction. To feel beyond the surface is to experience joy and sorrow at the same time. To ask why again and again is to realize how few answers truly satisfy. But there is a strange beauty in this burden, because the price of depth is also its gift. Intensity. You don't just exist, you feel. You don't just succeed, you understand. You don't just live, you awaken. Many people chase comfort, but the philosopher chases truth, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because beneath the chaos, beneath the disillusionment, beneath the ruins of false belief, there is something unshakable, the quiet, enduring strength of someone who knows. There is a kind of power that doesn't need to dominate, perform, or impose. It exists quietly. Like the sun, it doesn't beg for attention, yet everything moves because of it. This is power without ego. It's not the power to control others, it's the power to resist being controlled by fear, by flattery, by insecurity. It's rare, because ego often rides in with success. The more you achieve, the more you're tempted to believe that you are the source of your greatness. But wisdom reminds you, you are not the cause, you are the channel. What flows through you is shaped by your discipline, your clarity, and your character. The most dangerous leaders are not the loudest, but the ones who forget they are human. The most trustworthy ones, they remain humble, not from weakness, but from wisdom, because they've seen what happens when the ego takes the throne, and they've sworn never to kneel to it again.